You've clicked on this video because you're looking at trying to improve your ability to program CrossFit workouts. Well, today we're going to teach you how Unbound Athletic programs our CrossFit workouts based on a system that both CrossFit.com has created, as well as some of the little things and nuts and bolts that we've added into our own little systems to help make workouts fun and enjoyable, but also strategically beneficial for your exact goals and what you're trying to achieve in your training. Now, a couple things in mind. If you like this video, please leave it a like. I want to release the weekly and the full cycle versions of this video. So if you do enjoy this, please let me know and we can look at getting those out for you guys so you get a bit of an understanding of how to program for an entire cycle, not just one section. Let's jump straight into it. A couple of things we're going to cover: modalities, which is going to be how many movements are present in your workout. The stimulus, so what you're trying to hit, whether it is a pulling motion, a pushing motion, a squatting motion, so on and so forth. I'm going to cover time and reps, so how many reps you should put in a workout, what is a high rep range, what is a low rep range, things to keep in mind there. We're also going to cover the load, which is very important. Is it going to be a heavy or a body weight workout? Are we going to work in light or moderate ranges? And then finally, we're going to touch on frequencies, so how often you should program some of these things. And then we're going to give an example of the workout of the day, keeping in mind what your yesterday's workout of the day was. Let's jump straight into it. So modalities, just to clear this up, this will be a bit more brief because it is only a singular workout program video. We cover a bit more in detail of these things in a broader spectrum when we get to the 12-week programming video. But modalities, things to keep in mind: single modality workouts, they're pretty straightforward. These are like things like Grace, which is 30 clean and jerks for time at 61 and 43 kilos respectively. That would be what a single modality workout is. One movement performed for a duration or for a rep range. 1 mile run would technically be a single modality workout. If you want to check out the Grace workout video, we've got one on our channel. We posted it last week. It'll be up the top somewhere. Couplets and triplets, they're going to be a cornerstone of training. Now, this comes in part with the frequency portion, but they should be your bread and butter. They should be the ones that you're programming most. Reason being, you can go from one stimulus to another relatively easy as long as they are opposing stimuluses and keep intensity high. That's why the workouts like Fran are so popular and work so well, because you're going from a push to a pull. The only thing that's going to let you down is your heart rate, which will be relatively lower because the muscle groups used aren't the same. You're not going to come to muscular fatigue before your heart rate will give out on you. Whereas in that sense, like Fran, your heart rate is the thing that's going to give out to you before your muscles will fatigue because you're giving them enough variance. That's why that modalities work really well for intensity. Triplets, obviously, we would just include one extra one of these. You might go pull, push, squat. You might go hinge, squat, midline for whatever reason. You could go push, squat, midline, any variation of the three, or whichever other ones you want to add in. You could also go all the same. Redundant workouts are a thing, not as popular, but things like JT, the hero workout, where it's handstand push-ups, ring dips, and push-ups, would be a redundant workout where you're doing 3 of the same muscle group, and muscular endurance and fatigue is going to be the thing that's limiting you, not necessarily your heart rate. Finally, chippers. Normally, chippers are workouts that include more than 3 movements. So 4 or more movements is most commonly a chipper. You would see Murph, where it's got mile run either side, 100 pull-ups, 200 push-ups, 300 air squats. It's a chipper workout, lots of repetitions. It's going to take a long time, over 20 minutes, and it just requires you to chip away at it. There are other workouts that have less than 3 movements that could be considered a chipper, but generally you see the majority of chippers being more than 4. Stimulus. Covered a little bit in the modalities part, but stimulus is just what muscle group you're trying to target. The big thing to keep in mind is yesterday's workout. What did you do yesterday? If you didn't do anything yesterday, then that's fine. But because of this video is the workout of the day edition, the most important thing to consider is what you did before. So if yesterday you did a lot of hinging, you did a butt ton of deadlifts, maybe it was even a deadlift day where you just did 5x5 deadlifts, then keeping that in mind, you probably want to avoid deadlifts for the next session, unless you're going to work them from a very light load for technique purposes. You want to pick another stimulus. That's pretty straightforward. Don't do the thing you already did. Give it a bit of time to recover so you can do something else. You might choose some squatting. You might choose some upper body pushing. whatever you feel like it's going to need. Just make sure you vary your stimuluses. Time and reps. This is less important, but it is good to understand some rep ranges and some time domains. Normally these work side by side, but not in all cases. So there are some and or but or what ifs. But in this sense, most of these work side by side. What I mean by that is what would be generally a single modality workout would generally be something that has either 30 or less reps or takes less than 5 minutes. 1 mile run. 1 mile run is probably a pretty bad example. 1K row, I should say. 1K row, 30 clean and jerks for time, a 1RM deadlift. These things are single modality and they're normally less than 30 reps or less than 5 minutes. Something that's between 30 and 75 or 5 and 12 minutes would be a workout like Helen, which is 3 rounds, 400-meter run, 21 kettlebell swings, 12 pull-ups. That would be a workout that you would finish anywhere from about 6 to 9-ish minutes, depending on how fit you are. Some people would obviously go over that depending on their ability level. But that's kind of a rep range that sits between that 75 reps. It sits on the cusp of that. It's getting you about 9 to 12 minutes. So that kind of fits well into that like light rep range area. From there, our moderate rep range area, 75 to 150. Yeah, you would see this like Karen, even though that's a single modality workout, 150 reps for time. Normally it takes people probably not 12 minutes. Normally it's a little bit less than that, but for the reps, that's usually how it works. Generally, you'll see rep ranges like this, B workouts. Trying to think of one that's probably a little bit longer. Maybe something like Elizabeth for many normal athletes. That has generally 90 reps into it. It normally takes around about that 8 to 12 minutes. So that's where the rep range comes. A little bit variance with the time. Usually just depends on the athlete's particular ability level. But normally you'll see 75 to 150 reps normally take between 12 and 20 minutes. Finally, 150 plus reps, normally over 20 minutes. Your AMRAPs, generally like Cindy, your workouts like Murph, things that are just longer, Chad, etc. Even though it can be single modality, it's very unlikely that you're going to get Chad. But if Chad does come up, it's 1,000 Spock step-ups for time with a rucksack on. That's going to take more than 20 minutes. Normally it takes over 60. So there are workouts out there that are like that. But for the majority of things, most workouts over 150 reps will take 20 plus minutes. Most workouts in these range will take this time. Most workouts at less than 30 will take less than 5 minutes. You just got to keep that in mind when you're programming, which we'll cover off in frequency in just a second. Load. Is it at body weight? Do you have light loads, 40 and 30 on the barbell? A moderate load, is it 60, 40? Is it 70, 50? Or are we going heavy? Is it a heavy squat day? Is it a heavy pressing day? Or are we doing a workout like Holloman that has 100 kilo cleans in it? Thinking about the load is going to be very important. Obviously, you're going to have to base it off the rest of the factors that you're going through, but just keep that in mind when we are looking at programming. And lastly, frequency. With the modalities, you don't want to program too often, chippers and single modality workouts, unless you are someone who is training specifically for an event, for example, like a powerlifting comp where you need to practice your squat, bench, and deadlift, or a high rocks competition where you're looking at doing a lot more chippers, or a triathlon, etc. But that's also going to be in play, all that, depending on which one we're doing. Unless those things are in play and you're looking at just general fitness, you're probably going to sit more in the 4 to 5 a week of couplets and triplets. So keep that in mind. Obviously, varying your modalities will be key. Having 1 or 2 days a week where you do some single modality work, having 1 day a week where you do a chipper will be very important if you're looking at general fitness, but it also depends on your goals. But that's probably a big thing to keep in mind. 4 to 5 of your 7 sessions of your 7 workouts in a row should be couplets or triplets, come from that center range. Stimulus, obviously vary your stimulus. Just don't do the same muscle group every day unless you have a blaring weakness, like your midline is horrible or you can barely push, 30 kilos off your chest. That's the only time you would start to double down on those. But for the majority of people, vary these, try and keep them a little bit different. You pull push one day, you might squat or hinge the next. You might go back to pull and push the next day, so on and so forth. And the load, obviously, unless your goal is powerlifting or strongman, where load needs to be heavy, or it's an endurance sport or high rocks, where the load needs to be relatively light or body weight, you should still vary your load. Most of the workouts will sit between the light and moderate range. You'll only very so often do heavy and very so often do nothing. So that's very straightforward. That's very standard. Now, I know you guys are here to see, what about writing a workout? How can we give some examples of how to write a workout using this format? Let's do it now. Firstly, I'm going to write up what yesterday's workout was, and then I'm going to give us an example of what we can program today based on how we program CrossFit workouts at Unbound Athletic. First example we're going to use is back squats. 5x5, 75%, a cornerstone to lower body training and a relatively good session in its own. This is what was programmed in your previous workout. First thing you're looking at is obviously load. Load's going to be moderate to heavy in this one, as 5x5 at 75% for most people will be relatively close to their max effort workload that they can perform at 75%. Alternatively as well, it's obviously a squatting component, so that's something to keep in mind. But the time domain on this one will actually be quite moderate, if not long. If we're looking at someone with relative strength who is anywhere from an intermediate to an advanced athlete, this can take anywhere from 20, maybe even 40 minutes to be able to perform all the sets successfully with a relative amount of rest, unless we're doing it on some sort of weird time domain like every 2 or 3 minutes. For the majority of people, this will be pretty challenging and it will require a decent amount of time. So using that knowledge in mind, we know that it was a squatting workout. So we've got the stimulus in check. It was single modality. So we've got that point crossed, and the load will be either moderate or heavy based on own perception, with a time domain, which we could comfortably say is about 20 minutes. So for this instance, we want something that's probably going to be either a couplet or a triplet. Now, I'm a personal fan of triplets because it just keeps things a little bit more exciting. 2 movements can be a bit monotonous back to back, especially if the workout is relatively long, anyway from 5 to 12 minutes. Can be a bit boring. It's like, oh God, we have to repeat these movements a couple of times. So in that instance, I will like a triplet. I'm thinking something like pull, push, midline would be a good combination. And rep ranges, we can keep these simple. 21, 15, 9. You can usually do the same reps across the board, or some form of progressive rep range that allows us to be, a little bit more creative. Let's give 1 or 2 examples of what this will look like, and then we'll move on to another example on the next portion of the video. For this one, we've picked 2 examples on the workout just so I can show you guys different ways to write almost the same rep range and same stimulus. Of course, there'll be some slight variance between these ones because of how the reps are performed and how this waterfall pattern works quite well, why CrossFit likes to endorse it. But otherwise, let's take a look at our previous workouts. Remember, back squats, 5x5 at 75%. We're going to then cover into the example workouts, which was 21, 15, 9, calorie row, toes to bar, and push press. Regardless of which version we choose, the frequency, the big thing is the modalities have changed. So we've gone from single to triplet. The stimulus has changed. We've gone from just squatting to pull, push, and midline. Time domains have changed for something that is well over 20 minutes to something that is now well within that 5 to 12 minute range. And then finally the load. The load has changed from something that was either moderate or heavy to something that I would consider a lightweight in a lot of workout senses. 50 and 35, it's not necessarily too light, but I would say it's probably close to that medium range of weight or moderate range of weight, if anything. So let's take a look at the workouts themselves. 45 reps of each movement in total. So this will be kind of in that 75 to 150. You could expect 12 minutes maybe at the most for these 3 movements, unless there is some sort of skill acquisition issue or the weight is a little bit too challenging. But this pattern will work quite well in a lot of senses. 1, the rower can be used for many as some sort of recovery element if those other 2 movements become a little bit too challenging. 2, these movements in a sequence or in any sequence could be performed relatively well without any necessary fatigue. There's no grip carryover fatigue from the rower and the push press that's going to affect the toes to bar too much. There's no shoulder pressing fatigue that's going to carry over too much for these 2. And the rowing isn't going to really necessarily ruin your lats in any way, where the toes to bar won't become possible or your hip flexors will get too fatigued to lift your leg. Even in this rep range where it's 3 rounds of 15 each, there's no real big downside to doing either or, and all these movements kind of complement each other very well. I think the big difference between these 2 rep ranges and why I can also lean more to this one in a lot of senses, the only downside I'll give in a moment, is because of the reps. 21, 15, 9 can either be confusing, or a lot of people with like this weird OCD for odd numbers are like, oh, it just gives me this awkward, like icky feeling. Where the 3 rounds of 15, it's easy to remember. Every round is the same and the format is consistent. The downside is obviously the reason why this pitter patter works quite well is because as you fatigue, the reps get lower, so your intensity remains high. Whereas in this format, it kind of remains at the 15s, which is the worst round of 21, 59 in any sense anyway, because you're most fatigued in that portion of the movements because you've gone hard on the 21s. It kind of keeps that. So the intensity may be a little bit lower versus this one, but both workouts are relatively good. Let's run through a new yesterday's workout, and in this case I'm going to live write the workout of what tomorrow's is going to be. We're back. We're going to run through yesterday's workout. Now, yesterday's workout was obviously the workout we just covered before, so you guys are very familiar with what we're looking at. The big thing we haven't added in the last 2 days of programming has been any form of hinging. So hinging is something that we can utilize to our advantage, whether we use power cleans, deadlifts. You can even look at accessing things like kettlebell swings. There's plenty of movements you can utilize in that sense that's going to cover some sort of basis, but obviously it's going to cover whatever your goal is. It has to be something that's varied compared to the previous days. And the big thing that you need to consider, it needs to be fun. If it's not fun, most people probably won't end up doing it. Now, something that we could put in here with a downside of having an extra push day would be something like Holloman, where we've got that squatting motion, we've got handstand push-ups, and we've got power cleans. That'd be something that'd be fun. It would tick off the chipper box, have a lot of gain in that, but I don't really want to go down that route specifically just because we're kind of doubling up on some of the modalities, which won't give me a good feeling for the rest of the week's training. But if we have a quick assessment of what we've already got, we've got some pulling. Because it's rowing, you could probably still repeat pulling again. It's not really going to tax your system too much as far as your muscles being too fatigued. Lots of toes to bar were done, 45 reps in total. Hip flexors and midline might be a little bit fatigued, so that's something to keep in mind. Same with the shoulders, as push pressing at 50 would be challenging for most, even at 45 repetitions. So there's some things to keep in mind when we carry over to the next day. What we'll have a look at instead, we'll go for a classic couplet. I think we'll combine some hinging from the floor and some pushing from the ground. These things are going to be pretty good. The one thing that I didn't mention before when we were covering the stimulus, that's something that you could also keep in mind, is the direction that you're pulling or pushing from. So in this instance, we did a vertical press. We could technically do a horizontal press and it still be a different stimulus. Yes, it's going to be similar and have some similar muscle groups, but there are some muscle groups that were left out, like the pecs weren't approached in that one. And we could add that into our workout day, which is actually what I'm going to do for this one. I want it to be a couplet. I want it to be relatively short. We'll say around about, I'd probably go, let's say 50 reps or 45 reps for that instance. I like the 45. It just seems to be nice. Works with 21, 15, 9, works with 3 sets of 15. It's just a good number that you can work with quite well. So we'll do a 4-time workout. I will say 45 deadlifts. You could also do power cleans here if you had a bit more of a high skilled athlete or you had some stimulus that you wanted to try and hit. Power cleans would actually fit pretty nicely, but for this instance, I'm going to go deadlifts because it's more relatable for most people. And then 45 burpees over bar. Just because they're easier, there's less skill requirement for many. Now, in the instances of fun, it probably isn't that fun. It's probably pretty painful, most people looking at it. But from a good stimulus, a great workout programmed, and something that's going to cover up the previous days, this would be quite good. Now, load. Load's going to be the last thing we need to look at. We obviously went pretty heavy for the squats. We went moderate on the push press. I want something that's going to be light and fast. So I'm probably going to say something like 60 and 40 would be ideal weights for that one. And that creates a freaking good workout. I think we should do one more just for you guys, just to give you a bit more idea of what we're looking at. Something that's going to be either a chipper. No, we'll do a chipper. We've left out a chipper. We might as well add in a chipper to this one. That's going to be our next workout. I'll be back in a moment. We move into our final workout of the video, and this is going to kind of jump into what the week training process would look like. This is just a bit of a way that you guys can break down the last couple of sessions that you've done and get a bit of an assessment of what you've covered in case you're a bit unsure of what to program for the next day. Now, obviously, we've got the rules, we've got the modalities, the stimulus, the time, the frequency, and the loads, all positioned in this little chart down here, which might be a little bit jumbled and compressed together, but we'll try and navigate our way through it. So the last 3 sessions movements have been 45 on the row, toes to bar, push press, deadlifts, and burpees, and then 25 total back squats that have been thrown in there. So there's a pretty consistent theme of repetitions. That 45 to 50 rep range is pretty popular for a good stimulus at a moderate load for most things. We've got the 25 back squats, which are done at a heavy load. So that's being able to attack a different type of stimulus. We've got the type of movements, the load of movements that are. We had 3 bodyweight movements, a medium, a light, and a heavy. So good variance there, lots of bodyweight though. So when we're looking at another workout, we're probably looking at either making sure it's light, moderate, or even towards that heavy range. When we look at the stimulus, we've got 2 pulls, 2 pushes, 1 midline, 1 squat. So some good variance there, but obviously favoring towards the upper body. So what we would look at is some form of lower body or midline workout to help round that session out, to help us figure out where our third session is. With that information in mind, let's program the final session. So we've got a bunch of information we can utilize to our advantage. The first thing that's running through my head is we haven't done any form of running or some other variants on other machines. So that could be utilized as a way to add in a filler movement or a conditioning movement that's body weight to increase intensity, and then combine that with a moderate or light squatting pattern, something that also involves the midline. My thought process moves straight to running and front squats. That's going to be the combination. Yes, the fun factor is probably not going to be so high. So we want to try and make it a little bit more enticing for the athlete. Let's have a look at, or it doesn't have to be running, it could be skipping. Let's have a look at something like this. 5 rounds. 8, 6, 4, 2, front squats. I'm going to change my pens. 50, something like that. So a couple of things this workout will do well. 1, it's going to be fun. Every time you get back to the front squats, the load increases, the reps decrease. Double unders will be your own challenging skill, unless you can't do them, which will be frustrating. A little challenging skill that's relatively easy to get through, but it's not necessarily a rest for the workout. You could have a caveat to this workout where you clean the workout from the ground. And the 5 rounds just indicates that you go double unders, 10 front squats, double unders, 8 front squats, so on and so forth, with each round those reps decreasing. The weight increasing also gives you a bit of time to recover and change weights, noticing that the load on the bar is getting a little bit heavier. I find these workouts or descending ladders extremely fun and engaging for both the athlete and the coaches who are implementing them into their training. This will also cover off a few different stimuluses. We've got 30 reps on the front squats, a little bit more squatting added into the week, which is great. It's also a midline movement as well. So it both combines as a squat and a midline movement, because your midline is just as much challenged as your lower body is in this particular variation of squatting. Double unders, which will also obviously attack another bodyweight movement, but it adds a 250 repetitions into something that is relatively easy. This is where our rep range will be relatively high, but the time domain will be still relatively moderate, anywhere from about 12 to 20 minutes, depending on the athlete's ability for this workout. And obviously weights can be scaled or adjusted accordingly based on your strength level. But this is just some examples of how to write your CrossFit workout based on how we do it here at Unbound. I've just holstered my pens like a pair of pistols. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave a like and comment down below if you do want to see the week or the full cycle variation. The week will look a little bit more like this, but we'll cover a bit more in detail how to utilize this in a way that's going to allow you to program week to week. So we'll have a previous week and then how you should program next week based on what you've already done. Any particular questions about anything specific, please let me know in the comments down below. But otherwise, if you enjoyed this video, I'll see you on the next one.